Talking about Oklahoma State Cowboy athletics, specifically Oklahoma State basketball, with our OSU beat writer, Frank Bonner. This is Garen Eman, columnist for the Tulsa World. Frank, want to get into the state of the current OSU team with Mike Boynton trying to get his guys in position to make some kind of a postseason and contend for the top half of the Big 12 at first, because it is that time of year, a solemn time when it comes to OSU athletics. Remember, the 10th anniversary is coming up this week, and it's the 20th anniversary of one of the saddest and most meaningful days in OSU athletic history. You're still relatively new to the beat. You've arrived a little late to the significance in terms of the timeline, but it doesn't take long to really understand just how deep and meaningful this is. I was going to see if you wanted to offer any reflections you had on what you've discovered about it, what you've learned, and how guys are talking about it this year.
Yeah, my first trip to Stillwater, when I got to tour the facilities, I learned pretty quickly how embedded, those 10 lives and remember those 10 lives is in the DNA culture. And, Mike Boynton, although he wasn't here when it happened, he has done a really phenomenal job of pushing, remembering the 10 and instilling into his players what that means. And so you can see it through and through covering this team, how important those 10 lives are to this program.
It's nice that opposing coaches and programs who come through Gallagher-Iba make a point to still stop as well, correct? That it's something you feel, even if, again, you're not, to use your word, embedded necessarily in the culture, you still pay your respects, and that goes on today.
Yeah, and I think that's it's obviously important for the program, but I do think it's important for those opposing coaches, just because everybody knows, especially if you were around during that time, if you were in college basketball, how that rocked, this organization and how it rocked, college basketball specifically, just to have a tragedy like that happen. So I do think it's a good thing to see that opposing coaches also pay their respects and kind of keep that memory alive.
You touched on this briefly, but I want to backtrack. You asked Coach Boynton about the anniversary after the Baylor game Saturday, and again, Mike is not from this part of the country and is although he's not as new as he once was to the program, is relatively new as a head coach, not nearly as ingrained as certainly Mr. Iba was once upon a time, Eddie Sutton was. But Mike's been pretty good about recognizing past connections and importances, whether it's people or dates, and that continues with Remember the 10. Mike's been a really strong ambassador, has he not, for this date?
Yeah, and one of the things he said when I asked him is, he said there isn't anything more relevant into what Oklahoma State athletics and what the university is in the way that they remember those 10 lives. And so he's fully committed in making sure that those memories live on. And as the head basketball coach, I think it's nice to see that a coach is that, committed, whether he was here or not. So he does a great job of instilling that into the players as well. Some of these players were either babies or not even born when the tragedy occurred, but he continues to make sure that they know when they put on that OSU jersey that you represent the memory of those 10 lives.
The two staff members at the Tulsa World, I think most tied to OSU athletics, are Bill Haston, my colleague and current sports columnist, and Jimmy Trammell, who now writes for our scene section, but used to cover OSU basketball and was the beat writer at the time of the tragedy. Both Bill and Jimmy are working on some stories to commemorate the anniversary of the Remember the 10. We invite anyone watching the video to read what they have to write, because I know it's going to be deep, meaningful, and emotional stuff a little later or throughout this week. Before we turn you loose, Frank, a couple of comments about the current OSU squad. Tough loss to Baylor, good performance, gutsy performance, but a loss nonetheless. Where do these guys stand, you think, in terms of where they want to be at the end of the year?
I think they feel like they're in good shape, especially, coming off that big win in Kansas. I know they lost against Baylor, but for the first 29 minutes, they played really well without their best player, Cade Cunningham. And I think when you look at this team, everybody wants to talk about Cade Cunningham and as good as he is, but there are a lot of other really good players on this team who can play well even when Cunningham isn't on the floor. If you look at the Texas Tech game, when Cunningham fouled out, they still outplayed Texas Tech down the stretch to win that game in overtime. So you've really got some really good pieces surrounding Cade Cunningham that leads you to believe that they can do some good things down the stretch.
Give me one thing this team needs to improve on to hit its ceiling as in terms of potential.
They have to prevent second half droughts.
Okay.
You saw it even in the win against Kansas. Kansas went on a big run. West Virginia went on a run. Baylor went on the run. They have to negate those big runs that they allow in the second half. If they do that, I think they can be really good.
All right, keep reading Frank's material. He's our OSU beat writer. He's got more on Mike Boynton and the Cowboys as the week moves forward and the season moves forward. Look for his stuff, look for my stuff, and keep following us either in the Tulsa World or here at tulsaworld.com.